Welcome to Inclusivity Unlocked, the podcast that's all about inclusion and diversity, brought to you by the Association Explorator. We are chatting with you from our studio in Craiova, and together we'll make sure that tricky isms and complex terms from the world of inclusion become a part of your everyday life. Okay, now it's time to unlock. So today's topic of our podcast is women's rights and feminism. There will be three parts inside of this podcast. In the first part, I would like to present a brief history of the feminism with its waves and movements. And in the second part, I will be joined by my colleague from Voluntariat pentru Comunitate in Craiova, Maria, volunteer from Egypt. And we will try to discuss with Maria the situation toward the feminism in Egypt. And to be honest, I have no clue what her answers will be because we never discussed the topic, so stay tuned to find out. And in the first part, I will have a chance to invite to the studio a young woman from Craiova, and I believe that we will catch some insights from local opinion from a Romanian person. The question that we will raise, what does it mean to be a feminist? What the feminism means? Why are people sometimes really scared hearing the word feminist? And what is the situation in Romania, of course? So I'm sure there will be a lot of interesting sides this discussion for everyone, so let's dive into it. Okay, let's discuss today the brief history of feminism. To start with, what is the feminism? I'm sure different answers can be given to this question, but the most common among ordinary people probably will be the belief in social, economic, and political equality of sexes. While the more scientific will sound like feminism is a range of social political movements and identities that aim to define and establish the political, economic, personal, and social equality of the sexes. Pretty long, right? But like any ism, feminism is a movement as a construct, an umbrella term which researchers divide internally into waves or stages. So what are those waves of feminism? Our story begins in the 18th century, during the Age of Enlightenment. Enlightenment philosophers like Rousseau focused on social classes inequities and largely ignored gender issues, often portraying women as inferior. Moreover, in 1789, Declaration of the Rights of Man excluded women's legal status. Enlightenment female intellectuals such as Olympe de Gouges and Marie Wollstonecraft challenged this exclusion. De Gouges' Declaration on the Right of Woman, 1781, and Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Women, 1782, advocated for gender equality, emphasizing women's rationality and the need for equal education, work, and political opportunities. The term feminism was first used in 1837 by French philosopher Charles Fourier. Initially, it described feminine qualities or character, but that meaning is no longer used. By the late 1800s, feminism started to mean the right for equal rights and for women, and became closely connected with the movement for women's voting rights, more known as the suffrage movement. And here we come to the discussion on the first wave of feminism, which belongs to the period between 1838 and 1920, the suffrage movement. Debates that we outlined previously led to discussion on the first Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, New York in July 1848. This landmark event marked the beginning of the organized women's rights movement in the United States, where activists like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott presented the Declaration of Sentiments, calling for the social equality, economic, and political rights for women. The convention set the stage for future activism and was a crucial step in the struggle for gender equality. But it's important to notice that women were fighting not only for their right to vote, they were also interested in achieving the right to have education, receive wages, own their property and have a legal identity. For example, at this period, if a woman was working, then her husband had her wages. Women couldn't bring issues to court because they didn't have legal personhood. So, if you were raped or experienced domestic violence, women couldn't go to a court because they legally didn't exist. And the process of receiving rights on paper started. 1802, Australia grants the right to vote for women. 1813, Norway allows women to vote. 1817, Russia grants women the right to vote following the Russian Revolution. 1918, the United Kingdom grants women over age of 30 the right to vote. The second wave is marked by the fact that feminists begin to actively fight patriarchal foundations and discrimination against women in society. Feminists drew public attention to previously hushed-up topics related to female corporality, abortions, menstruation, pregnancy. Moreover, this era saw significant battle for control over reproductive health, including the right for contraception and abortion. This battle was provoked by the appearance of the birth control pills on the market. As a result, countries like France and Italy witnessed major legislative changes. A central figure in this wave can be called Simone de Beauvoir, who wrote a work, The Second Sex, published in 1948. The Second Sex has become a reference book for an entire generation of women. Simone de Beauvoir makes an important revision of French phenomenological philosopher Merleau-Ponty's aesthetics. Simone de Beauvoir examines the issue from the standpoint of existentialism and forms the idea of female subject in Sartre's concept of freedom. Already in the introduction, de Beauvoir criticizes the other nature of woman, which in her opinion is a consequence of the fear of competition from men. The third wave of feminism, usually understood as a turning point of the 1990s, during which women ceased to be perceived as a monolithic group. Minorities were identified and the greater privilege of some women in relation to others was recognized. At the same time, there is a fight against age-old norms and social constructs. The sense of continued racial inequity and discrimination against LGBT people is reflected in Rebecca Walker's 1992 article, How I Became a Third Wave, in Me As magazine. Third wave feminism often used pop culture and media to change stereotypes and promote feminist ideas. Figures like Naomi Wolf and movements like Riot Girls in UK are good examples. The Riot Girls used the intense music to shout the women's issues and empower, turning anger into action. On another hand, the Guerrilla Girls wore guerrilla masks and used humor and art to fight stereotypes and discrimination against female artists. But at this point, what is called radical feminists appear, which would push many away from the movement itself. And where we are now? Fourth wave of feminism from 2010s to present. The fourth wave of feminism is characterized by digital activism, focusing on issues such as sexual harassment, body shaming, and the online misogyny. Me Too movement appeared. This global movement, which gained significant traction in Europe, highlighted the pervasive issue of sexual harassment and assault. It empowered countless women to share their stories and demand accountability. Platforms like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and all social media have become crucial tools for feminist activism, allowing for the rapid spread of information and the organization of movements. Fourth wave of feminism continued to tackle issues such as gender-based violence, reproductive rights, economic inequality, while also empathizing the importance of mental health as self-care. This was our brief history of feminist movement. All right, thank you for coming and sitting down with me in this podcast studio to discuss not that easy questions, but I'm actually really excited and interested to know your opinion about the feminism. And the first question is, would you call yourself a feminist?
Well, I've been thinking about the feminism concept in general, and maybe earlier in life I would call myself a feminist, but nowadays I wouldn't call, I mean, I cannot call myself completely feminist because I think there are some concepts that I am not 100% with when it comes to feminism in general. So I am somewhere in between. Like, I am, of course, a feminist, but with some concerns. And yeah, that's why I cannot tell you, like, I am the feminist.
I think it's like a pretty common situation because a lot of people are scared of feminism or a lot of things connected with it, especially like after the third wave of feminism, like in 90s, a lot of people with all those protests and activism, which and the word radical came around.
True.
So at this moment, everyone got scared because nowadays also a lot of men using like, oh, you're feminist, you're not shaving, or you're not getting beauty treatment and stuff like this. But what feminism like means to you? How would you determine this world?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, for me, feminism is when you're very clear about your rights, but also very clear about other people' rights. Because being a feminist is not something that means that you're denying the presence of anyone else on the planet, and
Especially men, yeah.
especially men, or like in general existence of any other person, no matter how they like to be referred to. And for me, being a feminist, it helps me like decide what I want as a woman, and what I need, and what I'm expecting from people, and what I want for other women around me. And it helps me be proud of the concept of women in power in general, because it is something that exists, and it is something that needs improvement from all women around each other. So, in general, being a feminist is not something that people should be like scared of, but they should just be clear about what is feminism for them, and like not like most people perceive it as it has something to do with hygiene, because like this is something and this is something else. But of course, feminism is something needed, and it gives a lot of women the rights they need. So
yeah, so for you, like from positive part, it means advocating for rights. Am I correct here?
it is mostly about rights, because before the feminism, I mean, originally the feminism concepts came from here, that a lot of women haven't been receiving the rights they needed, or the normal living, the normal jobs they wanted, or the equal treatment. So, especially coming from a Middle East, that's the place where I'm talking to you from. So, yeah.
Yeah, and here I'm coming like to Middle East, like asking how it's in Egypt because actually I have no idea how it is. Yeah, I understand that still Egypt is mostly Muslim, yeah,
Yes.
which also gives a lot of traditional idea probably and a lot of ideas for women what to do or not to do, like how to cover themselves to proper like to look properly from the religious point of view. Yeah, and how you feel it.
Yeah, so the thing with Egypt is you don't really get to choose for yourself whether you, even if you really want to be a feminist, but it's not something very safe to go out loud in the streets and be like, I'm the feminist and all of this. And like some women, and I can say like some young adults have been starting to say this, and it hasn't ended up in like the best possible way. So you have to be really smart if you're in Egypt, how to express that you're a feminist, or that you support women's rights, and so on. The thing with Egypt is, For example, there are some rules that you cannot just go away from. Like, for example, about heritage or so inheritance is like until today it's not like, for example, from a father to the daughters and sons, it's not 50-50. It's still like 80 and 20 if there is the 20. And in general, there is a concept that a guy should own more, a guy should have the better job, a guy should have the best experience in general in life and more opportunities and more chances. Meanwhile, a lot of women have the potential and they have the time and the energy and the power to do all of this, but because it's a man, so a man should receive this before the woman, and then we talk to a woman. Like, if there are extra chances, then we give it to a woman. If there is not, then it just goes to the man. So it's kind of funny, but you have no choice. And if you really want to discuss this, you have to do it in a way that is very diplomatic, so no one can tell you later, like, oh, what is that? Or like, that's not how it should be, and so on.
Like, it is possible to be independent, like just to be a woman without being married or without living with your father, or how it works. Like, do you need to go from one man to another for still have your own identity?
Well, yes and no. Yes, because if you do, like, you can do it, but there are gonna be a lot of consequences. Like, society would be looking at you in a really bad way, like, oh my goodness, how this.
If she is alone,
if she is alone, like, if you're gonna go out of your parents' home, it's probably because you found another, like, husband or someone to secure a better life for you. But if you just want to go out of family's home because you want to go out of family's home, it's not really perceived as a normal life consequence. It's perceived as a girl who, or a woman who is now like, is not grateful, is not thankful that she has her family, while like they are two different things. Like, you can have your family, but you can have your space, you can have your own place, you can even get a pet, or like do whatever
make your
you
choices
want. Make
of
your
what you
choices,
want.
exactly. But this bare, like, minimum life thing is not very possible. Like, you would have to really put a lot of effort in this to happen. Even nowadays, it's much more than other days, and between young people and each others, between friends and so on, it is accepted and it is happening. But if you go into older generations and be open about, no, I'm now like living on my own, and it would be something like, are you okay?
So you kind of need to come up with an excuse
Yes.
to be living alone.
Exactly, like, unless you're going to another city for like an extremely better job, or like you receive the chance of your life somewhere abroad, something like this. Even this sometimes is, they would be like, but what's so special about this chance? Like, you can just be with your family. What's wrong with them? So that's why it's not something very easy to do. Yet you can do it, but you have to be mentally prepared for all the things that are going to happen, all the neighbors that are going to talk. And we even have this joke, like the security man of a building or something, he'd be like, ah, she's living on her own, she's probably not so.
But you're talking mostly about your experience, and you lived in Cairo, which is like the capital. But do you think it's different in other regions? Maybe you had some chances to talk with people from other cities, or do you feel privileged in a way that you're living in a capital and you did really have more options than rather other young women in Egypt?
Yeah, so if I'm gonna talk about this, I would have to say that I really am privileged in general, not just because I'm living in Cairo, but because I come from a family that is really tolerant. Like, for me, being at 24 years old, living abroad at this point of life, and they are pretty okay with it, that's something that you wouldn't normally find in other families, even inside Cairo. So I would say that it's more depending on families than it's depending on area. Of course, area has an effect, and in Cairo, this effect might be a little bit less, but in rural rural areas or like in other cities like Alexandria and so on. Maybe Alexandria is like a little bit closer to Cairo in terms of traditions and so on, but I'm pretty sure in Upper Egypt it's much more complicated. And honestly, there is no this much connection with people from there that I know, like real life experience. But last year I got in contact with some women living in Cairo from Upper Egypt, and also that's a great step for them. Like they are living on their own in Cairo because they come from other cities, and like they manage to have a job, they manage to have a life, talents and like communities. So it really, it depends on the family you come from. It can go extreme, it can go like they wouldn't accept to a point that they'd be chasing you, and it would feel really not safe. So unless you feel safe from where you come from, you cannot really do what you want to do or you aspire to.
How it's in terms of legal aspect, you know, or administrative one, you still have these rights on paper at least, like to be independent as a woman, to have the same rights, to vote the same way as men does.
Well, legally, some rights are legalized, but some others not really. For example, I'm talking about Egypt, but if we go a little bit to Saudi Arabia, for example, they just released this right that a woman is allowed to drive, but only if she has a man. And even though it can sound ironic, but like now it's perceived as a good step that she is allowed to drive. Yes, there is a
At
man
least that.
next. Yes, exactly. Even though like driving can be something that people would not even consider in life. Like, is that even a right that should be written and legalized? But for them, yes, because
But in Egypt, you can ride a car.
I can
right?
drive
Thank you.
at
Thank God.
least. Yeah. So it really depends.
Yeah, but we're talking like how fast this kind of. I'm not sure that we can use the word progress in these terms, yeah, because it's still. Others would say we're forgetting the heritage. Others would say no, we're having more rights, which is the progress. But still, there are steps, but I'm not sure if they fast enough to really give women an understanding what they can do in life, and if it's enough. How do you feel like it goes, and how much time maybe we as humanity, yeah, like the planet Earth, need to achieve more for women?
Oh my God. I mean, I don't really know. Like, for example, when I first arrived here, some very basic things were impressive for me, such as when I took the bus from a city to another and I found a woman driving
Driver?
the bus. That was like, wow, I haven't seen it before. And it felt big. And this small example gives me hope that maybe where I come from is not that civilized yet about women rights, but other places are. And pretty much, I think if we continue in that pace, like, I'm not sure if there is a specific amount of time that the planet needs for real to give woman all the rights she needs, but I would say that unless there is constant looking into the matter, whether here in Europe, whether in Middle East, wherever it is, but constant looking into this matter in order to make it even better. Otherwise, it will not. Like, it would just stay as it is, or even come backwards. Because looking back, like a few years ago in Egypt, it wasn't like this. Like the pharaohs, they have been, a woman was looked at like the icon, like a goddess. And nowadays, it's not like this.
But it seems like those women who looked like a goddess, you know, it's exceptional woman. I don't know, Cleopatra, for example. Yeah, she's like an amazing one example. But at the same time, while she was this icon, everyone, every other woman were slaves, like near her, or she was also taking this male's attitude, taking it on herself and acting with other women, not in a very polite way, probably. She was also treating them as slaves or as those who need to bring her something and not getting paid. Or
also true, but the thing was that timing in general, everyone was just slaves except for the king, the queen, and like people in positions. But other than this, everyone was slaves. So I think it was more of a matter of hierarchy in general rather than it was man and woman. And the idea of having in general a queen that everyone would follow, everyone, even like it was a man, it was a woman. I believe her attitude was with both at this point because she had the authority to. And for example, raising a topic of a king or a queen, now having a candidate woman as a president is like, wow, like there is a progress for that. I'm not sure if the society is ready yet for this, but like still.
But do you know, or maybe you can characterize the movement in general? Are people going to protest, or I don't know, with flyers, banners like "We want our rights"?
I'm not really sure about the safety of this thing. Like, I wouldn't encourage, if I had a daughter or even myself, I wouldn't encourage to go on such protests because, like, even normal political protests nowadays, people are really afraid, and we didn't have a very good experience with the 2011 protests, and like, we still have these family members who are like traumatized from this, and everyone is just now looking for like a good living. And then when it comes to rights, okay, we're gonna work on this in a way, or like people try to be sneaky also about it, like we're gonna get our rights, but maybe in our smaller community, like we're gonna surround ourselves by people who are gonna really give us the rights we need, give us the freedom we need, and so on, rather than just make it very official like this. Because to go on a protest at these days, I don't think is a
even a chance.
Yeah, even a chance. So even though a lot of people would kill to make it legal and like make it heard and so on, but I don't think this is something to be done any soon.
And maybe coming back to the topic like of relationships inside of family, if something happens inside of family, maybe you heard stories of domestic violence, for example. Is it possible for a woman to safely find a shelter? Are there NGOs helping in this kind of situations, or is there a law securing women like legally in cases something happens with them in relationships with their husband?
Yeah, I'm afraid to tell you that probably no, and there are even like more rules in against of the woman in these cases. I don't know if this is related, but for example, a man in Egypt has the right to kill his wife if she betrayed him.
Oh my God.
And no one would tell him anything, not even her family. I mean, even the family, if the family practice like domestic violence with a woman, in the case of betrayal, they have the right to. Like, she cannot just go to police and be like, hello, my family is being violent for me. Police would be like, you go back and get your violence. So
Yeah.
it's not.
But I understand that I think this topic nowadays is one of the most difficult ones because we also in Russia have new laws nowadays that are really changing the system inside of like home relationships, and we also had cases of men killing women. Of course, police investigated it, but it's not like there were a lot of cases of women going to police and putting their statements of how they've been treated, and actually still police needs to investigate it, but they were like, there is no sense for you even to bring this paper because it won't change anything, so you can bring it, but we won't do anything. And it really led to some really serious stories where women were killed or bullied. Yeah, so it's not an easy topic to talk about, and I totally understand that it's not one day made decision. Do you want to talk about sex education? Yes, in Egypt. Sex education. I'm asking Marie, then if because it's not the easy topic, especially because we all, I don't know, young women, and maybe it's not that comfortable to talk about. Does it like even exist, the sex education, I mean? And do women, like older women in families, talk with young women about contraception or pills or the ways how not to lead to abortion, for example? And what, again, coming back from my background, because nowadays our church, which is pretty, as an institute, powerful in Russia, they kind of said that the best way that contraception shouldn't be applied in any way and abortions shouldn't be made at all, and they don't understand that it's the right of woman and her body, even though I understand that those words that I'm saying might provoke a lot of discussions, and a lot of people won't agree with me in terms of woman's body, woman's choice. But still, yeah, those discussions keep going, and still people don't talk that much about that. And there are a lot of cases of 16 years girls who been experiencing, not knowing even what is happening, because mothers never talked with them, or maybe they're growing up without mother. So then who will talk to them? And in schools, which our system is still very much connected with Soviet system, which is pretty strict and built on shame. And teachers, they would never talk with you about it, and no one talks about their period. This is like taboo topic, like, oh my God, what is that? Even though they're experiencing it themselves, but they're not like giving a hand. Or then they're trying, they're also saying very patriarchal things like, never let your man know that you're on a period. And you're like, but like we're living in the same space. He kind of should notice probably at some point. So yeah, coming back to Egypt, how it works there.
Yeah, I think, well, Egypt is a very religious country, and even though, yes, it is a Muslim country in a way or another, but in general, the concept of religion, everyone in there is really religious, whether it's a Christian, whether it's a Muslim. And in both religions, having a sex topic opened, it's looked at as something like, no, let's not get into there. So people grew up like, I remember in my like science class in high school, maybe girls at this point like knew a little bit more about period because they already had it, but boys were like, oh my goodness, we thought it's a disease, and we were
Really
like,
cool.
yes,
Perfect.
so this is the level of education like people get, and especially men, until a very until an old age they are still like not so sure how it works and why it happens and all of this. So people really perceive it as a taboo until today, and even a lot of adults do not like to bring up this topic, and they see it more as a controversial topic, and that it shouldn't ever happen until it's time. So this is how they perceive sex education. I don't think it exists at all, like unless you're studying science or planning to become a doctor or something. Otherwise, it's like even a mother in a most typical Egyptian family wouldn't talk to you about it. And it's one of two options. Either, as you said, like someone might just end up trying different things and being very shocked after, or someone wouldn't know anything about it and just creates imagination in the head and imagines how it is like. And in both cases, it's not the right thing to be done. So
But how did you get your knowledge then? Because you're still pretty open to talk with me right now, and you're not scared to open up this, as well as I am actually. But again, in my case, there are a lot of social media platforms in Russian, special magazine called Wonderzine. that was popular. Nowadays it's also criticized in a way. It's being criticized still, not because they're writing something like bad, just inside of Russia they're like asking, are they real feminists, or this is not real feminism, like, but it's like inner stuff. But still there is like publications, knowledge, access to, I don't know, social media open up, I think, a lot.
I think also like at this age, I had access for online platforms like educational ones. There are some communities nowadays in Egypt that they are more ready to educate people about it, and also I like, again, I come from a family that might not be the most typical Egyptian family, and they might be a little bit more open to discuss and more open to explain and so on. And I think that's how I got my education from. And I always try, like, whenever I have a question, I always try to go to trusted resources to like know about it. And
yeah, or a couple of resources to compare and contrast.
Exactly. So this is how it was happening for me, and this is how I hope it would happen, like for
Everyone.
more people in Middle East.
Yeah, for me also actually family was a resource. My mom was never scared to explain to me something from her own perspective, but I know that she was trying her best, you know. She wasn't scared or feeling shame, because she was more about like, you're a woman, I'm a woman, I will share with you something I know. You can check in social media if what I'm saying is okay, because also time goes, and I don't know, some cosmetic stuff that was used before nowadays, like the articles like never use it anymore or ruins your skin, something like this. Yeah. But I think the key here is really to discuss in a way.
Exactly.
I think there exist in like sisterhood communities that might also be helpful.
We do have that also, like the wound community on Facebook and so on. But I don't know, for me it feels a little more like a mess, because like each one comes from a really different background, and they are sharing their experiences which might not be the same for everyone else.
Confusing.
Yes, exactly. So it brings up more questions and more confusion rather than gives answers and reassurance, which is needed. So for me, these groups are like controversial a little bit.
You all the time need to kind of check with yourself if it suits you.
Yes,
and
exactly.
not be scared if it's not. That's also the point. Yeah. Are there any advices you will give to young women?
Well, if there is only one advice, like you shouldn't be really afraid to ask, and it's better to ask and like really search for any conclusion to something that you have a question about, because otherwise you will end up feeling lost, and you don't want to try things and then be traumatized or something. So you should really ask before you try anything, and like be in a community that makes you feel safe about it and like comfortable to ask. So this is my advice.
Thank you, Maria, for joining this part of our episode.
Thank you, Asya.
Yay! Girl! Now it's time for us to discuss how was historically situation with the feminists in Romania. Romanian women gained the right to vote and participate in the democratic process relatively early comparing to other countries. The suffrage movement in Romania gained their chance in the early 20th century, with women advocating for equal rights and political representation. Key figures included Maria Rossetti, Sofia Nadezhde, and Eugenia de Rues Ianculescu, who were instrumental in advocating women's rights through their writings and activism. 1906, the Society for the Civil and Political Emancipation of Women was founded, one of the first feminist organizations in Romania advocating the women's suffrage and legal equality. From 1929, women were allowed to take part in local elections, but their right to vote was made dependent on their level of education, social position, and special merit over society. And the 1938 Electoral Act stated that women and men who knew how to read and write were allowed to vote from the age of 30. In 1946, the education census was abolished and universal suffrage was established for both sexes. Under the communist regime, gender equality was promoted as part of the state policy. Women were encouraged to participate in workspace, and laws were enacted to support equality in education and employment. But despite the official rhetorics, traditional gender roles persisted and women's activism was tightly controlled by the state. Independent feminist movements were not allowed to operate freely. After the fall of the communist regime in 1989, Romania experienced a revival of feminist activism. New organizations and NGOs emerged, focusing on a range of issues, including domestic violence, reproductive rights, and gender discrimination. Significant progress was made in the legal framework for women's rights. Romania ratified the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women in 1982, and new laws were enacted to address domestic violence, sexual harassment, and gender equality. Despite progress, nowadays Romania is the second worst performing EU country in gender equality, according to the 2022 data of the European Institute for Gender Equality. However, it has a significant potential to unlock. But what is happening now? Are there any activists working in Romania? We can talk about Central Philia, a feminist NGO from Bucharest, which particularly active in the field of gender equality in research. In 2016, the center initiated the campaign Stop Sexual Harassment in Universities, which included an extraordinary survey to map the phenomenon, types of harassments, causes, barriers to report and perceive solutions. The study was repeated in 2021 by Central Philia as part of another initiative, Act for Safety in Universities. The results suggested a much greater prevalence of sexual harassment than the reported by Commission of Ethics and received an administrative decision. It was a brief sum up of history of gender equality and feminism in Romania, and we invite you to listen the next part with our guest. Welcome to the next chapter of our podcast. We're here chatting with Diana. And
Hello.
Can you please introduce yourself a little bit for our listeners?
Well, I'm 23 years old. I graduated psychology recently. I currently study a master's degree in clinical psychology in Sibiu, but I stay here a lot more than
In
there.
Craiova.
Yeah, in Craiova. That's kind of it, you know.
Yeah, and I was really interested to hear opinion of a young woman from Craiova or from Romania in general, with the opinion of gender rights, how the situation is and how people perceive feminism. And actually, my first question is pretty strict. And can you call yourself a feminist?
Of course, no doubt. Yeah.
And most of your friends, they would also easily answer that question, or sometimes it provokes some contradictional views?
Personally, I think they wouldn't be my friends if they would respond differently.
Okay, but what is feminism for you then?
Uh, Everything about equality, I guess. Equality of rights, equality of how am I perceived. I'm not actually a fan of gender roles. I mean, I can be and do what I want, no matter how I was born and with what I was born.
But do you feel that your opinion is like common here in Romania, or a lot of people will be against feminism, or they're scared of the term?
I feel like the people I surround myself with are a lot, and especially young people are a lot more open to that concept, but when it comes to older people, it's not so common, or they pose like they are, but you can see that they're not from their actions and thoughts sometimes.
But from legal terms, if we're speaking like in Romania, it's allowed, like equality is obviously
Yeah,
constitution. But what about like LGBTQ plus rights? If you know something.
Like we are just growing from this point of view. Like the last 10 years, it's been a massive change in the side of let's open to that.
Because Romania went to European Union, or you don't think that it's a fact?
I think it's a factor. I think it is. And of course, LGBT is not legally accepted in Romania, but I feel like it's going to happen soon, and that we're gonna be more open as a society. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like yay.
Yeah.
If we're talking about difference that much in older generation and younger generation, what do you think really affected younger generation that much that now they're more open-minded? There is no good like examples, I would say.
Maybe more access to information. I feel like the younger generation, even people younger than me, have a lot more access to that. I feel there are a lot of social media people who talk more about it. I think somehow influences from the outside, from other countries, you know. I feel this helps a lot.
But are there any role models in social media space, for example, or I don't know, Instagram accounts?
Someone specific, you say?
Like feminists specific, or
well, I feel like Daria Jane is very, very feminist. I mean, she is, and she's also a LGBTQ representative. So it's very important.
And some like Instagram accounts also exist, like providing information.
Mosaic, as far as I know, except Romania, there are a lot.
But when you're growing up, still parents say, like, you're a man, don't cry.
Yeah, I can stand that.
Exists.
I can't stand it. I mean, it's so... Or like the pink-blue thing, like you're a girl, you wear pink, you're a boy, you wear blue. I've always loved blue as a kid, and everyone told me like, not everyone, but some people told me like, you're a girl, you should wear pink or red or something like that. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it. Yeah.
Another tricky question is actually how the like religious beliefs also affects the ideas in the society. Do you feel that church also like gives directions to Romanians how to think and act towards gender questions?
I feel religion and church still has a big impact, like on a lot of levels, from feminism to LGBTQ. I feel like some people cannot maintain them both. Like they believe they have to pick a side, and it's not always like that. Personally, I believe you can be a Christian and you can be feminist and you can be LGBTQ and so on. You know, you don't really need to pick sides, in my opinion.
Do you have some ideas about what you would like to see in future in Romania? Like what you want really to be changed?
I would like a lot for us to be more acceptant of others and maybe to not care so much about what other people do or think, as long as it does not impact us on any level, you know. To be more supportive of each other, to not care about what a person does in private or who she kisses or he kisses or whatever.
Yeah, and does misogyny exist, or is it like misogyny, I mean, that women treat each other not in a supportive way? Is it still exist here, like women try to compete?
Yeah, it exists. I would say it's not some pregnant phenomena like lately. Like I see it so rarely these days.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a sign we are going in the right direction.
Would you give any advices for younger yourself or for younger girls who are also trying to understand if they can include themselves into feminist movement, for example, or how to communicate with others?
I feel like first they should listen to their heart, and I tell this to myself, younger me, listen to your heart, and always try to look at things with an open mind and think before you speak and before you judge, because judging someone is the easiest thing you can do, but it leads you nowhere.
Diana, thank you so much for coming and for joining our podcast. I think it was a really interesting view on how gender roles are seen in Romania. We would like to thank you for listening to Inclusivity Unlocked podcast, as this time we unlocked a very difficult topic of feminism, and we would like to thank our guests, Maria and Diana, for coming and sharing their thoughts. And we would like to invite you to subscribe on our YouTube channel to support our activity. And see you next time to unlock the new topic.